a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Stephen King. Stephen Edwin King is an American author of horror, supernatural fiction, suspense, science fiction, and fantasy. His books have sold more than 350 million copies, many of which have been adapted into feature films, miniseries, television series, and comic books. King has published 54 novels, including 7 under the pen name Richard Bachman, and 6 non-fiction books. He has written around 200 short stories, most of which have been collected in book collections. King has received Bram Stoker Awards, World Fantasy Awards, and British Fantasy Society Awards. In 2003, the National Book Foundation awarded him the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. He has also received awards for his contribution to literature for his entire oeuvre, such as the World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement, and the Grand Master Award from the Mystery Writers of America. In 2015, King was awarded with the National Medal of Arts from the United States National Endowment for the Arts for his contributions to literature. He has been described as the King of Horror. Early life and education. King was born September 21, 1947, in Portland, Maine. His father, Donald Edwin King, was a merchant seaman. Donald was born under the surname Pollock, but as an adult, used the surname King. King's mother was Nellie Ruth. When Stephen King was 2 years old, his father left the family under the pretense of going to buy a pack of cigarettes, leaving his mother to raise Stephen and his older brother, David, by herself, sometimes under great financial strain. The family moved to DePere, Wisconsin, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Stratford, Connecticut. When King was 11, the family returned to Durham, Maine, where his mother cared for her parents until their deaths. She then became a caregiver in a local residential facility for the mentally challenged. King was raised Methodist and remains religious as an adult. As a child, King apparently witnessed one of his friends being struck and killed by a train, though he has no memory of the event. His family told him that after leaving home to play with the boy, King returned, speechless and seemingly in shock. Only later did the family learn of the friend's death. Some commentators have suggested that this event may have psychologically inspired some of King's darker works, but King makes no mention of it in his memoir on writing. King related in detail his primary inspiration for writing horror fiction in his non-fiction Danse Macabre. In a chapter titled, An Annoying Autobiographical Pause, King compares his uncle's successfully dowsing for water using the bough of an apple branch with the sudden realization of what he wanted to do for a living. That inspiration occurred while browsing through an attic with his elder brother, when King uncovered a paperback version of an H.P. Lovecraft collection of short stories he remembers as The Lurker in the Shadows, that had belonged to his father. King told Barnes & Noble Studios during a 2009 interview, "I knew that I'd found home when I read that book." King attended Durham Elementary School and graduated from Lisbon Falls High School, in Lisbon Falls, Maine. He displayed an early interest in horror as an avid reader of EC's horror comics, including Tales from the Crypt. He began writing for fun while still in school, contributing articles to Dave's Rag, the newspaper his brother published with a mimeograph machine, and later began selling to his friends stories based on movies he had seen. The first of his stories to be independently published was, I Was a Teenage Grave Robber. It was serialized over 4 issues of a fanzine, Comics Review. In 1965, that story was published the following year in a revised form as, In a Half-World of Terror. In another fanzine, Stories of Suspense, edited by Marv Wolfman. As a teen, King also won a Scholastic Art and Writing Award. From 1966, King studied at the University of Maine, graduating in 1970 with a Bachelor of Arts in English. That year, his daughter Naomi Rachel was born. He wrote a column, Steve King's Garbage Truck, for the student newspaper, the Maine campus, and participated in a writing workshop organized by Burton Hatlin. King held a variety of jobs to pay for his studies, including janitor, gas pump attendant, and worker at an industrial laundry. Beginnings. King sold his first professional short story, The Glass Floor, to Startling Mystery Stories in 1967. The Fogler Library at the University of Maine now holds many of King's papers. After leaving the university, King earned a certificate to teach high school but, unable to find a teaching post immediately, initially supplemented his laboring wage by selling short stories to men's magazines such as Cavalier. Many of these early stories have been republished in the collection Night Shift. The short story The Raft was published in Adam, a men's magazine. After being arrested for driving over a traffic cone, he was fined $250 and had no money to pay the petty larceny fine. Luckily payment arrived for the short story The Raft, then entitled The Float, and All I Did Was Cash the Check and Pay the Fine. In 1971, King married Tabitha Spruce, a fellow student at the University of Maine whom he had met at the university's Fogler Library after one of Professor Hatland's workshops. That fall, King was hired as a teacher at Hamden Academy in Hamden, Maine. He continued to contribute short stories to magazines and worked on ideas for novels. During that time, King developed a drinking problem which would plague him for more than a decade. In 1973, King's first novel Carrie was accepted by publishing house Doubleday. King had thrown an early draft of the novel into the trash after becoming discouraged with his progress writing about a teenage girl with psychic powers. His wife retrieved the manuscript and encouraged him to finish it. His advance for Carrie was $2,500. King's paperback rights later earned $400,000. King and his family moved to southern Maine because of his mother's failing health. At this time, he began writing a book titled Second Coming, later titled Jerusalem's Lot, before finally changing the title to Salem's Lot. In a 1987 issue of the Highway Patrolman magazine, he stated, "The story seems sort of down home to me. I have a special cold spot in my heart for it." Soon after Carrie's release in 1974, King's mother died of uterine cancer. His aunt Imrine had read the novel to her before she died. King has written of his severe drinking problem at this time, stating that he was drunk delivering the eulogy at his mother's funeral. After his mother's death, King and his family moved to Boulder, Colorado, where King wrote The Shining. The family returned to Western Maine in 1975, where King completed his fourth novel, The Stand. In 1977, the family, with the addition of Owen Phillip, traveled briefly to England, returning to Maine that fall, where King began teaching creative writing at the University of Maine. He has kept his primary residence in Maine ever since. In 1985, King wrote his first work for the comic book medium, writing a few pages of the benefit X-Men comic book Heroes for Hope starring the X-Men. The book, whose profits were donated to assist with famine relief in Africa, was written by a number of different authors in the comic book field, such as Chris Claremont, Stan Lee, and Alan Moore, as well as authors not primarily associated with that industry, such as Harlan Ellison. The following year, King wrote the introduction to Batman No. 400, an anniversary issue in which he expressed his preference for that character over Superman. Pseudonyms. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, King published a handful of short novels, Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, The Running Man, and Thinner under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. The idea behind this was to test whether he could replicate his success again and to allay his fears that his popularity was an accident. An alternate explanation was that publishing standards at the time allowed only a single book a year. He picked up the name from the hard rock band Bachman Turner Overdrive, of which he is a fan. Richard Bachman was exposed as King's pseudonym by a persistent Washington, D.C. bookstore clerk, Steve Brown, who noticed similarities between the works and later located publishers' records at the Library of Congress that named King as the author of one of Bachman's novels. This led to a press release heralding Bachman's death, supposedly from cancer of the pseudonym. King dedicated his 1989 book The Dark Half, about a pseudonym turning on a writer, to the deceased Richard Bachman, and in 1996, when the Stephen King novel Desperation was released, the companion novel The Regulators carried the Bachman byline. In 2006, during a press conference in London, King declared that he had discovered another Bachman novel, titled Blaze. It was published on June 12, 2007. In fact, the original manuscript had been held at King's alma mater, the University of Maine in Orono, for many years and had been covered by numerous King experts. King rewrote the original 1973 manuscript for its publication. King has used other pseudonyms. The short story, The Fifth Quarter, was published under the pseudonym John Swithin. That was published in Cavalier in April 1972. The story was later reprinted in King's collection Nightmares and Dreamscapers in 1993 under his own name. In the introduction to the Bachman novel Blaze, King claims, with tongue-in-cheek, that Bachman was the person using the Swithin pseudonym. The children's book, Charlie the Choo-Choo, From the World of the Dark Tower was published under the pseudonym Beryl Evans, who was portrayed by actress Allison Davis during a book signing at San Diego Comic-Con, and illustrated by Ned Dameron. It is adapted from a fictional book central to the plot of King's previous novel The Dark Tower 3, The Wastelands, and published in 2016. Digital era. In 2000, King published online a serialized horror novel, The Plant. At first the public presumed that King had abandoned the project because sales were unsuccessful, but King later stated that he had simply run out of stories. The unfinished epistolary novel is still available from King's official site, now free. Also in 2000, he wrote a digital novella, Riding the Bullet, and has said he sees e-books becoming 50% of the market, probably by 2013 and maybe by 2012. But he also warns, here's the thing, people tire of the new toys quickly. In August 2003, King began writing a column on pop culture appearing in Entertainment Weekly, usually every third week. The column, called The Pop of King. In 2006, King published an apocalyptic novel, Cell. The book features a sudden force in which every cell phone user turns into a mindless killer. King noted in the book's introduction that he does not use cell phones. In 2008, King published both a novel, Doomakey, and a collection, Just After Sunset. The latter featured 13 short stories, including a novella, N, which was later released as a serialized animated series that could be seen for free, or, for a small fee, could be downloaded in a higher quality. It then was adopted into a limited comic book series. In 2009, King published Her, a novella written exclusively for the launch of the second-generation Amazon Kindle and available only on Amazon.com, and Throttle, a novella co-written with his son Joe Hill, and released later as an audiobook titled Road Rage, which included Richard Matheson's short story, Duel. King's novel Under the Dome was published on November 10 of that year. It is a reworking of an unfinished novel he tried writing twice in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and at 1,074 pages, it is the largest novel he has written since it. Under the Dome debuted at #1 in the New York Times bestseller list. On February 16, 2010, King announced on his website that his next book would be a collection of 4 previously unpublished novellas called Full Dark, No Stars. In April of that year, King published Blockade Billy, an original novella issued first by independent small press Cemetery Dance Publications, and later released in mass-market paperback by Simon & Schuster. The following month, DC Comics premiered American Vampire, a monthly comic book series written by King with short story writer Scott Snyder, and illustrated by Raphael Albuquerque, which represents King's first original comics work. King wrote the background history of the very first American Vampire, Skinner Sweet, in the first 5-issue story arc. Scott Snyder wrote the story of Pearl. King's next novel, the 22nd of November 1963, was published November 8, 2011. And was nominated for the 2012 World Fantasy Award Best Novel. The 8th Dark Tower volume, The Wind Through the Keyhole, was published in 2012. King's next book was Joyland, a novel about an amusement park serial killer, according to an article in the Sunday Times, published on April 8, 2012. It was followed by the sequel to The Shining, titled Dr. Sleep, published in September 2013. During his Chancellor's Speaker Series talk at University of Massachusetts Lowell on December 7, 2012, King indicated that he was writing a crime novel about a retired policeman being taunted by a murderer, with a working title Mr. Mercedes and inspired by a true event about a woman driving her car into a McDonald's restaurant. It was originally meant to be a short story just a few pages long. In an interview with Parade, published May 26, 2013, King confirmed that the novel was, more or less, completed. He published it in June 2013. Later, on June 20, 2013, while doing a video chat with fans as part of promoting the upcoming Under the Dome TV series, King mentioned he was halfway through writing his next novel, Revival, which was released November 11, 2014. King announced in June 2014 that Mr. Mercedes is part of a trilogy. The second book, Finders Keepers, was released on June 2, 2015. On April 22, 2015, it was revealed that King is currently working on the third book of the trilogy, which name was later revealed to be End of Watch. The book was released on June 7, 2016, and hit the top of the New York Times bestseller list. On November 3, 2015, King released his 10th collection of short stories, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. The book was released to critical acclaim and commercial success. During a tour to promote End of Watch, King revealed that he had collaborated on a novel, set in a women's prison in West Virginia, with his son, Edwin King, to be titled Sleeping Beauties. When the novel was released in October 2017, it reached the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Writings. King has written 2 novels with horror novelist Peter Straub, The Talisman, and a sequel, Black House. King has indicated that he and Straub will likely write the third and concluding book in this series, The Tale of Jack Sawyer, but has said no time for its completion. King produced an artist's book with designer Barbara Kruger, My Pretty Pony, published in a limited edition of 250, by the Library Fellows of the Whitney Museum of American Art. Alfred A. Knopf released it in a general trade edition, and the short story was later included in King's collection Nightmares and Dreamscapers, published in 1993. The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, My Life at Rose Red, was a paperback tie-in for the King-penned miniseries Rose Red. Published under anonymous authorship, the book was written by Ridley Pearson. The novel is written in the form of a diary by Ellen Rimbauer, and annotated by the fictional professor of paranormal activity, Joyce Reardon. The novel also presents a fictional afterword by Ellen Rimbauer's grandson, Stephen. Intended to be a promotional item rather than a standalone work, its popularity spawned a 2003 prequel television miniseries to Rose Red, titled The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. This spin-off is a rare occasion of another author's being granted permission to write commercial work using characters and story elements invented by King. The novel tie-in idea was repeated on Stephen King's next project, the miniseries Kingdom Hospital. Richard Bachman, King's collaborator on Kingdom Hospital and writer of several episodes in the miniseries, published a fictional diary, The Journals of Eleanor Drews, in 2004. Eleanor Drews is a key character in Kingdom Hospital, much as Dr. Joyce Reardon and Ellen Rimbauer are key characters in Rose Red. King also wrote the non-fiction book, Faithful, with novelist and fellow Red Sox fanatic Stuart O'Non. Throttle, a novella written in collaboration with his son Joe Hill, appears in the anthology He is Legend, celebrating Richard Matheson. Their second novella collaboration, In the Tall Grass, was published in 2 parts in Esquire. It was later released in ebook and audiobook formats, the latter read by Stephen Lang. Stephen King and Richard Chismer co-wrote Gwen's Button Box, which was released in May 2017 from Cemetery Dance Publications and in audiobook from Simon & Schuster Audio. King and his son Owen King co-wrote the novel Sleeping Beauties, released in 2017, that is set in a women's prison. Music. King is a fan of the Ramones, to the extent that he wrote the liner notes for the 2003 Ramones tribute album We're a Happy Family. He states that he agreed to write them because he loved the Ramones from the first time heard them. Furthermore, King has referred to the band several times in his writing, both in his fiction and non-fiction. Non-fiction references include a mention in King's book Danse Macabre, where he calls the Ramones an amusing punk rock band that surfaced some 4 years ago. He also wrote about them in non-writing, making reference to Dancing to the Ramones, Gabba Gabba Hey, as one of the reasons he has maintained a good marriage. King included further Ramones references in his fictional work. He quotes the lyrics to the Ramones' debut single, Blitzkrieg Bop, in his novel Pet Sematary on numerous occasions, as in the sentence, "What is it the Ramones say? Hey ho, let's go." In the Dark Tower novel Wolves of the Calla, the Ramones get a further mention by the character Eddie Dean, who states that Roland stage dives like Joey Ramone. Critics have also noted the Ramones' references. Entertainment Weekly, for example, in their review of Black House by King and Peter Straub, note that King's trademark references were in evidence, quoting Dee Dee Ramone. In turn, the Ramones have referenced King on their song, It's Not My Place, from their Pleasant Dreams album of 1981 in the line, Ramones are hanging out in Kokomo, Roger Corman's on a talk show, with Alan Arkush and Stephen King. Further, Dee Dee Ramone wrote the song Pet Sematary in King's basement after King handed him a copy of the novel. The song was eventually featured as the title song for the Pet Sematary film and also appeared on the Ramones album's Brain Drain. King is also a fan of hard rock such as AC/DC. He arranged for their album Who Made Who to feature as the score for the film he directed in 1986, Maximum Overdrive. King has also stated that he likes heavy metal and has named bands like Anthrax, Judas Priest and Metallica as amongst his favorites to write to. In 1988, the band Blue Oyster Cult recorded an updated version of its 1974 song, Astronomy. The single released for radio play featured a narrative intro spoken by King. The Blue Oyster Cult song, The Reaper, was also used in the King TV series The Stand. King collaborated with Michael Jackson to create Ghosts, a 40-minute musical video. King states he was motivated to collaborate as he is always interested in trying something new, and writing a mini-musical would be new. In 2012, King collaborated with musician Shooter Jennings and his band Hierophant, providing the narration for their album, Black Ribbons. King played guitar for the rock band Rock Bottom Remainders, several of whose members are authors. Other members include Dave Barry, Ridley Pearson, Scott Turow, Amy Tan, James McBride, Mitch Albom, Roy Blunt Jr., Matt Groening, Kathy Carmen Goldmark, Sam Barry, and Greg Eels. King and the other band members collaborated to release an e-book called Hard Listening, The Greatest Rock Band Ever Tells All. King wrote a musical play Ghost Brothers of Darkland County with musician John Mellencamp. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?